Okay, let's just move a little bit. The springy, spongy legs. So just retrieving legs that will receive you, legs that will return you. So, when we have correct posture, that sense of the spine going down the legs, it really requires the legs to be soft, to be spongy in the way that we're trying to make them. Otherwise, they're always pushing the sacrum up and the tail will just naturally try and find another place to go, which is behind you. So first, we just move side to side to just get the legs springy. And just feel the sacrum. So the sacrum is that triangular bone. You've got the spine stacked on top of it. Then each of the two sides of the triangle reach down. Almost like a tentacle comes out of that side of the sacrum and just reaches down to the foot. So I get a sense of the sacrum touching the ground underneath my foot rather than resting on top of a leg, which is insulating it from the ground. I just really want to get the spine into the ground. And so the best way to do that is to turn the legs into parts of the spine. And so this part here, the sacrum going into the legs, really have to just make it seamless. There's no perceivable boundary. And as we get older, as we get more and more into the work, it becomes more internal and it becomes more meditation. It's really the same thing. So like you're allowing the work to take you to some deep primal place, to the source. Yeah? That's what the internal is really. The internal is just the path to the source. So it's no longer about physical movement or about self-defense or about exercise or anything like that. We're past that. We're old enough to have grown up. So now, and that path to the source, that internal, it can only be approached incredibly respectfully, and you demonstrate respect by having control over your thinking mind. If you touch any of these things with a careless, noisy mind, then you damage them. You do it, that's basically sin. So sin is really just ego. Sin is just talking to yourself. Yeah. When you're talking to yourself, what are you saying? You're saying, "Oh, I'm more important than you." Yeah. It's like an insult, yeah? It's an insult to nature. So we're just trying to quieten that down and just feel the connections. And it's an energetic connection. It's not a physical one. It's not just a matter of me just resting on a leg. I have to reach through that leg before I move into it. So it's like you're preparing the ground. You're making sure that your entry is not going to hurt. Yeah, so this leg can manage my weight. Yeah, so this feeling of the lower back just going down into the legs. So the spine is just an extension of the thighs, or the thighs are an extension of the spine. And just feel either side of the sacrum, just like two arms coming out, just reaching down the legs. And then just really look at that point, the sacrum, so the central axis of the sacrum. So the thing about energy is that there's always a flow in both directions, otherwise you don't have the equilibrium. So if something's flowing in that direction, something must be flowing back. And it's a bit like that with your eyes as well. When I look out at something, if I'm looking energetically, then there'll be the other end of the vision will actually be looking down externally. So my looking out is actually helping me find that source. Yeah? So my eyes gaze out, but the other end of that line finds my down shaft and my sacrum. This is the sense. If you're doing it forcefully, then the other end is just a hardness. Yeah. So force has to operate from some hard surface, you know, whereas energy will always flow through. So the ego is like our internal hardness, and that needs something really firm and solid inside to actually bounce from. Yeah, so that tends to be this split here, the split between the lower and the upper body. Yeah. So when you have an S-shaped spine sitting on these two legs, that becomes your ground. Yeah. And it's you no longer have an energetic connection with the ground beneath your feet. Yeah. Now just feel that central axis, and now just turn the finest of turns. Just feel it. The more your eyes gaze and scan the world that they're passing by, the more it helps you just get to that very local point in the sacrum. So the eyes have two ends. You have an end that's coming out here, but another end that's going in. So it's not, I don't look inside with the same eyes that look outside. It's the other end of those eyes. But like a top spinning on a point. And you just really want to just feel that point. So see it with the inner eye. And just notice that when you start thinking to yourself, you lose it. You lose that point and it just becomes a bit coarse and wobbly. So you really need to have a quiet mind on that point about which you're evolving. So we're just trying to get the range slightly bigger, so each time just go up an extra millimeter. And just feel the quality of the mind that's required. It has to be really light. Okay, so let's just bring it back. And then just feeling that. Feeling the sacrum reaching down through your legs to touch the ground. So you're just one head shape from the ground. Your legs have now become your lower back. Okay, and now let's turn, just I'd like the first warm-up exercise, but again, just turning from this point. So the ego or the subject is just our sense of self-importance, this feeling that to me, I am more important than anything else. And so I am in a position of sort of authority and judgment. So that's what we're trying to get away from. So you need to get into this big mind that can just expand and see your being in The mind, the more you focus here, the more the mind expands and just reaches out into the space. The mind becomes space. So we don't want the movements to be too physical. So it's not throwing a body around, it's really moving from some central place. So there's no carelessness. Yeah? So as I come into one leg, the tentacle here is reaching down. So you're touching the ground before you put the weight into it. Your mind has reached down the leg before your weight goes into it. So the physical is always preceded by something from the mind. So as you quieten down the front centers, the front dantians close in and the back opens up. So there's a real sense of a lot of energy coming out of your back points, min-meng, between the shoulder blades and the back of the head. Okay, let's just bring it back. Again, just retrieve the bum in. That's the most important thing. When your bum is in, the chest will naturally hollow. Okay, now let's just breathe it. We want this sense of the breath marking time. So I'm with time. If you're with time, then it will take you in a different way. So the ego hates time because it wants everything to stay the same, so it wants time to stop. So here we're just feeling every millimeter, every microsecond. So Dogen, the great Zen master, he said a moment lasts 0.065 of a second. Not quite sure how he calculated it, but that sense that there's all these moments that passing you by. So we just really want to just feel each one. So each one is like a millimeter of movement. It's good to do this in the pool because there's so much resistance from the water, you really feel every millimeter because it's an effort. If you want to do something better than you normally do it, just find a way of making it more difficult. That's basically a principle. We get things wrong because it's too easy, not because it's too difficult. Because we're careless, we're mindless, we're selfish. And then just feel the spine breathing. So here the spine is extending. So your head is leaning back a little bit. You want the tail going back a little as well. And then here the head comes forward, so the tail comes under. So the spine is extending, and then it's flexing. So it's as though the spine is breathing. So just feel the openness in the spine. So this continues up, and the tail continues back, and then here it closes down a little. So here extending as though your spine is growing into this extension. And then here it curls up. So this is the yielding phase. And so what you need to release in your sacral area to allow the tailbone to extend backwards. It doesn't just point backwards, it grows backwards. So here, if something relaxes and cools, it just feels quite raw, quite almost dangerous, like you could injure yourself. Yeah, so this is important, this phase, because you're withdrawing. So normally when we withdraw into self. So we withdraw into the head and continue thinking. So instead you've got this feeling of you're energetically withdrawing, all your tentacles come shrinking back in to the down chin. And then here they can extend again. Okay, and now let's bring it back to right course, just to retrieve this really. The best example I've ever seen of this spine all the way from the ground is John's dad towards the end. Yeah. So when he used to walk, it was very much, he was really leaning back, and it was like his legs were just totally leading, his head wasn't leading. So he was doing a lot of spiritual work with Dad. And when he got to a certain age, about 84, where he just didn't care what people thought anymore, so he wasn't self-conscious, so he could just allow himself to be like an expression of truth, of his truth. So he didn't care whether people thought he was weird because he was walking odd. That's the main reason, you know, we sort of perpetually get it wrong, because part of us is trying to conform, you know, no matter how non-conformist you think you are. Every time you leave the apartment, you're conforming. That's what I mean by bourgeois when I use that word. People get offended because they think I'm attacking them, which of course I am. But it's really, I was working with someone once, you know, and I used that word. He says, "Oh, you know, you're not using it right." It's, you know, so we looked it up in the dictionary, me and him together, and it just said bourgeois, the middle class, especially with reference to their materialistic values and their conventional attitudes. Yeah. And then he looked at me and says, "Well, that's exactly what you mean, isn't it?" I said, "Yes." So we conform, you know, we are conventional, unfortunately. So that's why, you know, that. So spirit is the subversive force, and that's what we want to take into every aspect of our life. So we need to become revolutionaries, yeah? Like Trotsky's sense of permanent revolution. Yeah? So every moment is a revolution. It's a casting off the old and just a march into novelty. Okay, and now let's just try and get the leg breathing. So just the left leg. So I just push with the leg. And then I pull with the leg. But very, very gently. I want the feeling that this is what the leg wants to do. When it becomes too full, it just protests a little and it wants to squeeze me out. When it becomes too stretched, it protests and wants to pull me back. And so I'm barely aware of the muscles that are working. I'm more aware of the smooth, tender beauty of the movement. Almost like I'm trying again just to feel every millimeter and enjoy every millimeter. I'm relishing the movement. So there's a natural bending, and then there's a natural straightening. So the leg is breathing. You know, the return has to come out. Otherwise it stops, and then time stops, and then you've lost it basically, and the mind will start racing. And you basically you become what John would call the wanker. You know? So someone that's just into themselves, someone that's playing with themselves all the time. And then let's just feel the natural turn. So when I come into the leg, I tend to turn towards it. Partly because the pull is pulling me that way, but partly because it's part of the tenderness, it's part of that tender release that I just want to come and just really face where I'm going. Out of respect, yeah? I'm turning this way to make that tender encounter. And then here I'm turning this way in order to face the direction I'm going. So you're always turning towards the direction you're going. So here I'm moving in this direction, so I'm turning there. So it doesn't matter whether you're pulling or pushing. It's just sensible, really. It's a good idea to face the way you're going. Otherwise, you're going to bang into things. So you need to be very quiet inside so that the movement can come from stillness. At the core of movement, there is stillness. Okay, let's just try some of the other leg. Just very, very gentle. And then just squeeze it. So when you pull with the leg, it's naturally tender. But when you push with the leg, it tends to be a bit bullyish. So you really want to really keep it slow. Just feel every tiny part, every moment, every 20th of a second. And all the time, you're just trying to keep the sacrum loose so that it can just hang. It's like your little tail has a mind of its own and it's sort of wriggling away. Just feel the turn. I mean, it's turning me this way. The part of me is a little bit not quite sure. And so it's very tentative. I'm turning this way, but I'm not sure whether I'm going to be rejected or not. So part of you is a little bit reluctant to move. because it's a big thing. The future is a big thing. And if you really open up to it, then it's a future that can't be predicted. It's a future that needs to be treated with absolute respect. Because the future holds events, and events are dangerous. And so the Western mind will always try and inhibit the event, try and make life safe and secure. Whereas the Eastern mind prepares itself to encounter the event. So that's what we want to do. So the Western mind changes the environment to suit the self, and the Eastern mind changes the self to suit the environment or eradicates the self. So that, then you become the environment. There's no difference between you and what's outside you. You're not a subject. Okay, so let's bring it back to our posture. So just remember that, when we opened up with the breathing. So here, when we extend, there's a sense of the tail extending. And so when you're standing in riding horse, you're actually doing both phases at the same time. So you're extending to reach down the legs with the tail, but you're also contracting in order to give a sense of rolling underneath the space in front of you. And so your tail is sort of going back a little to go down the legs, but it's coming under in order to undermine the person in front of you. This is what makes it difficult. It's not just a single adjustment. You have to do both at the same time. Okay. Now let's just try a little bit of this one. Again, just working from that central point, that line through the sacrum. So what we're trying to do here is just get a better sense of the energy from the back coming around. So just feel when you yield one side, it's the energy from my back that comes out into the attack. And so I'm attacking, you're attacking in Tai Chi with the energy from your back. And if you don't like thinking in terms of attack, just think in terms of connect. Yeah. You encounter, you join, bringing my energy from behind and I'm joining with what's in front. And then I just take some of that into me. So again, it's like eating, it's like just reaching the hand out for some food and then you're bringing it in. And the mouth is your down chin. So the more the yielding side can withdraw, the more the attacking side will be able to reach out. So to let your energy out on one side requires the other side to close down. This is just classic Tai Chi. So in Tai Chi, we're trying to unify the upper and the lower body into just one spine, so that we can then separate it into a front and a back, and a left and a right. If your body is upper and lower with a split here, you can't effectively be single weighted. It won't effectively split down the middle. Still the brain. So the front brain is closing down, the back brain is really opening up. Every time I turn the waist and I come into the leg, the tentacle of energy reaches down from my sacrum and into my other leg. So the energy precedes the movement. The awareness precedes the movement. Otherwise, you're stupid. That's basically what stupidity is. It's basically a lack of awareness. So I sink here, and something reaches down, and then I can pull myself into this leg. So I'm prepared. The mind prepares the way. Okay, let's just bring it back. So now you should feel like really round, like this is really, it's bounded. It has a boundary which is basically your board off. And something from here to come out, it's really reaching out. You're filling the whole room, but with your back energy. Just think of one of those targets, those pictures. This is the bullseye, the gancho. And then the outer rim is just bleeding into the space that contains it. So it's like you don't really have a boundary. So in a sense, what makes it difficult is that your mind has to be doing two things all the time. The mind has to be attending to both the yin and the yang. And the ego mind, it just wants to be single-minded. So it wants everything to be simple and the way it wants it. So what we have to do, we've got part of our mind contracting here, and another part of our mind just expanding out from our body. So we want to be able to contain both minds, but also to feel how one mind requires the other. They don't work against each other. Only really when I'm anchored here can I relax sufficiently to allow my big mind to seep out and fill the space. So in a sense, it's like a sort of it's just like an expression of Newton's third law of motion. Yeah. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So it's like, what's the action? Is the action my hand pushing, or is it my foot pushing the ground in order for the hand to push? So we're trying to slip back the stage all the time. Find where everything starts. Where does the impulse to actually let your energy out come from? Is it from an overweening sense of self? Or is it from something natural? Are you responding to some natural impulses inside? So in a sense, we just want to be reactive. Yeah? We want to just look at it and just see how all of our activities, our sort of independence, our freedoms, are actually reactions. So I do something because something is done to me. I'm responsive, I'm really sensitively responsive. And then what comes out of you won't be abrupt and harsh. It'll just be a polite response. But there'll always be a sense that it's come before. Yeah? So it's appropriate. It's sort of John. He just asked me once, "What's beauty?" And I said, "Beauty is truth." Because I was thinking of Keats. He says, "No, beauty is appropriateness. Yeah? When something is appropriate, it appears beautiful." Yeah? I still think it's truth and not appropriateness. But when you see real beauty, it startles you. It's not just appropriate, it's new, it's novel, it's unexpected. It has a spark to it. Yeah. So the central principle of Tai Chi is central equilibrium, making sure everything is balanced. Yeah? So we use the mind to scan through the different components and make sure. But of course, the mind is slow. It's okay when you're doing something that's relatively still and slow. But if you needed real speed, what is it that keeps everything in balance? And it's spirit. That's what spirit does. it keeps a little space between everything so that they can just naturally balance themselves. Because balance, things want to balance. Your nature is in balance. Yeah? It's the human that is unbalanced and unnatural. Yeah, so the atmosphere, the earth, it contains elements that should just combust. They should just combine and then just produce a deadness, but they don't. Yeah? And that is like the vital force, the elan vital, that sort of spirit of vitality that just keeps the situation alive, not necessarily organic life, but just that sparkle. All the time, just releasing it, just feeling one side of your sacrum reaching down and the other side. And they're always sort of playing with each other. And then the spine is a bit like a twine, it's a bit like a coil, as these two things have come up with. There's a beautiful poem by Coolidge. And at the end he says, and wonder is a twine of wands, lodged to spine of nothing I know, at least to hold. Yeah. So the spine is this twine of wands. I've got these two magic wands that have come up and coiled around. They'll always split as two, never as one. And that only manifests when the mind no longer wants to know. It no longer wants a certainty. It actually flourishes and thrives when it's in a state of uncertainty. And that's just a really natural mind. A mind full of spirit. Spirit's like it just wants to go everywhere, especially places it's never been before. So it's always endlessly curious. It's always feeling these things as natural. Yeah? So what do I need to let go of here to allow the energy to reach down from my sacrum? It's not as though I'm producing something, I stop stopping something. And then let's just bring it to attention. So first, just turn the toes out. And now, again, as I sink into this foot, this tentacle reaches down, and then I pull myself into the leg. Otherwise, I will settle on top of the leg, and I want to settle on the ground. Bring this foot up, and then just straightening the legs just enough, but still keeping this sense of the sacrum reaching down, not this sense of the sacrum being propped up. I'm not propping up my spine. I'm squeezing up it. I'm sending energy up it with my legs. So it's fluid. There's always a sense of flow. Yeah? And it spirals around the spine, comes out. And let's just go the other way now. So just, again, I just want to get, if I just put my weight straight into the leg like this, carelessly, then I will just settle on top of it. So I want to just feel the ground beneath my foot and then just draw myself down by bending the leg. And then this leg will just naturally pop up and I'll be able to step out of it. And now there's a tentacle of energy come down here, but that requires a slight turn to the right here. And that will also send the arm out because the arm and the leg are the same thing. And then I'll just coil them up. And then as I sink into this foot, there's a tentacle of energy comes down here, and then I can draw that. Again, just straightening the legs, always a bend. And just feel it. You know, if you have our feeling of verticality is actually incorrect. Yeah? So when you feel like you're vertical, then this isn't really down the legs. So if this sinks down the legs, then this will be forwards, maybe only a centimetre, but it'll be forwards of where it is when you're like this. And the head will be slightly back. And then that will allow the chest to collapse without it causing any sort of slump and depression. Right.